Hello everybody, this is Jackie Jones and it's Module 2 of Lecture 5, Plain Language, Writing, Drafting and Structuring Documents. So what we're going to look in this lecture is about the process of plain language. What do you need to do? How do we go about it? I like this comment by Albert Einstein: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And that's probably a good thing for you to print off and put in front of you when you are drafting your assessment tasks, thinking about how you can draft in a clear and concise way, and that is evidence of your understanding of it clearly and concisely. 3 stages there on the slide, so my apologies for that. But first of all, the idea. It's just thinking about it. What are you going to say? What is it that you're wanting to create? Actually having that thought process before you even get into the planning and organisation aspect of drafting. And then it's all about putting the structure together, using the tools, and the fourth is then reviewing it and making sure it's correct. Think about it. Create a mind map, lots of different aspects before you actually start drafting. This is important for you when you come to your assessment task number 3, which is doing a file note and letter. It is a thinking exercise. Even a letter to the client following your client interview is a thinking exercise, as are the negotiation reflection comments through Spark. Think about them. What is it that you're wanting to say, rather than just start typing? It really is all about planning and the organisation, both mentally and then physically, about the writing. So we have 3 components of the pre-writing stage, then when you actually do the writing, and then of course it's the post-writing where you review, make adjustments, etc. So in the pre-writing stage, what is the purpose of the document? And that really is the central question. So are you drafting a will? Are you drafting a deed between a number of companies? Are you drafting a letter of demand? Are you drafting a statement of claim? What is the purpose of the document? Who is your target audience? Are you drafting something that is going to go to the client? Is it something that you're drafting to go to an expert that you want to get their opinion on? Is it something that you are drafting to go to a judicial officer? So how you write to a judicial officer may be in a very different way as to how you will write to the client. And what do you expect following the letter, for example, or following documents? Does the reader have an obligation to do something? And if the reader does have an obligation, is it clear and concise so that they know and they can clearly identify what it is that you're expecting? In the writing stage, and I apologise because it looks as though this slide number 8 is a bit blurry. So underneath writing, there is the word structure. Make sure you engage with the tools to assist the structure, organising the material or the content, and making sure that you are using appropriate language for the target audience. As said, use the example of an engineer, for example. You may use totally different language as to what you would when you would be drafting a target audience, say a judicial officer or maybe an elderly client. And then the necessity to rewrite. So initial structure, then reviewing and the rewriting. And then the post-writing. It's all about evaluating the document. Does it actually fulfill what you want it to do? Does it reach the target audience? Can you reflect to see whether what you've written, in fact, is the scope that was intended? So all about think, writing, editing and polishing. I really like that slide number 10. It's clear, it's concise, and it really captures what we're talking about in drafting. Don't just get onto the keyboard and start typing away as you would as if you were sending a text message or Facebook, whatever, or just communicating just generally with friends and acquaintances. We are moving into a professional field, and we need to be mindful and conscious of the documentation we produce. I like this slide on number 11, where you've got a woman holding a smaller piece of paper in comparison to the one that's being just, melted down into plain language. That's what it's going to boil down to. And in many respects, that's what we're talking about, taking away those unnecessary words, using structure so that it's clear and concise. Forming a clear picture. And there on slide 12, there's lots of tools for structure. You might want to incorporate diagrams, headings, bullet points, absolutely essential, as is definitions. So, for example, you might have an address of a property, 1 Smith Street, Ryde. You can then define that as the Ryde property. So you would have Mr. and Mrs. Brown live at 1 Smith Street, Ryde, bracket, inverted comma, the Ryde property, inverted comma, bracket, and then throughout the rest of the document you could just refer to the Ryde property. Important when you are looking at structure that you have your main point first, general before specific, and that it's important information before unimportant, and that can be enhanced by breaking long sentences into smaller ones and paragraphs and clauses. It really is all about structure. There's some other tips. Lots of white space. For those of you who may not know what that means, it's if you've got a piece of paper, the paper is white, that you can actually see parts of the white paper amongst the writing. It is very difficult to read just slabs of writing without a break, and I'm sure go back to all those judgments that you've read over the years and the concentration that is required just by reading slabs and slabs of writing without any breakdown. Think about your line length and the type size. Don't use type size 9. Don't use type size 10, too hard. Don't use type size 14. So usually type size 11 is acceptable, and think about what space between lines and also the alignment. The use of gender-specific language should be avoided as well. Think about that. And importantly, the active voice, not the passive. Now, we as lawyers love to talk and to write in the passive, not the active. And it is a challenge for me, and it's a challenge for you to actually structure our documents using active language. And to assist us with how we're going to go about drafting in plain language, the Honourable Michael Kirby has very kindly given 10 commandments that he thinks we should follow. Commandments 1 to 5 are on slide 15, and you'll see there, keeping an average sentence to 20 words. Quite simple, it's quite hard to do. Use headings and subheadings. Group related material together. That again is another important aspect, so that it logically flows for the reader. Slide 16 has commandments 6 to 10. Again, preferring the active voice to the passive, preferring verbs to noun phrases. What are verbs? Can anyone remember verbs from our primary school days? Verbs are the doing words, things that we use for doing things. Prefer familiar words that are simple and direct. Don't use shall, whereas, hereunder, pursuant to, even though we are tempted because they sound like it's lawyer speak and we sound like lawyers. Please try and embrace for your assessment tasks use of the plain language rather than these types of words. And slide 17 gives you an example of passive voice and active voice. And again, this is just to get you into a thinking process of what is our natural way of drafting. I would naturally draft monthly statements will be sent to you. The solicitor was punished by the Law Society by suspension. The ball was kicked by Jack. Let's have a turnaround and see if we can put it in the active voice first. We will send you monthly statements. It says the same, but it's an active way of saying it. The Law Society punished the solicitor with a suspension. Jack kicked the ball. The police solved the crime. So the proponents of plain language said the use of the active voice is much easier and clearer for the reader. It does use usually few less words, but importantly, it gives a positive tone to the correspondence, and it takes the initiative of showing in an active way where we want to take the reader and what you are wanting to say.